Hi everyone, I'm Kenny McIntosh and welcome to the Roundtable, which has a square table, because that's how we like to do things here at WhatCulture. I'm joined by two polar opposite people in all senses of the word. I'm joined by a man with a lot of historical wrestling knowledge and credibility. Hello Dan, James, whatever you're called. How's it going?
Can you try again?
James Dixon.
Hi, how are you?
You
Polar
right?
opposite means deeply unpopular on YouTube. That's
are.
what you mean. So,
And then we have the John Cena of WhatCulture. The man who is so popular it is unfathomable to anybody. But he's here. Get used to it. It's Adam Blompier.
I am the face that runs this place. Hi, Kenny. Nice
Hello.
to see you.
to
Yes.
see you again.
Well, I'm certainly not a historian. So why have I been brought in to talk about wrestling history?
views.
Views, mate.
Views.
Views.
I'm just here to prop up this sinking ship. That's fine. I'll turn it around. Don't
It's
worry,
like when they
lads.
put Punk on a pay-per-view, but they had to put him on Messina because that's the only way people would watch.
There you go.
So this is about
I'll take
the,
it. I'll take it.
We're not going to try and be subtle here. This is a podcast or a video cast to promote this book, Titanscrewed, which he wrote. So the book is essentially about
Not gonna sell
1997 in WWF. It was a transitional year for WWF. They had just kind of finished the cartoon New Generation era, hadn't quite reached Attitude yet. A lot of stuff going on. The rise of Steve Austin and the Montreal Screwjob are the big topics today that we're going to cover. But Adam, you started watching wrestling after the Montreal Screwjob.
That's right.
2000, Royal Rumble, Cactus Jack and Triple H. That was your
my introduction.
But did you know at that time that one of the men in that match was partially responsible for, depending what version you believe, for
The
the
version in
Montreal
the book's
Screwjob?
obviously the version you believe, but
Maybe they've not read the book yet.
well,
so
then
we're
they'll
trying
have to buy it
entice
and
them.
learn, won't they?
If you let me get to you in a minute.
Sorry. It always happens this
Will
way.
you let us sell your book, please?
Yeah, please do.
When did you first hear about the Screwjob, and what was how did you find out about it, and what did you think about it? Because I imagine if you didn't know, if you didn't watch it in real time, it must be quite a confusing thing to read about.
I didn't find out about it for a bit, actually, because it was 3 years later. They'd done the whole eternal cycle of referencing the screw job like they did a year later at Survivor Series, and they would occasionally do. I found out about it just through just Wikipedia, really, because when you join any new hobby, you go and find. I didn't find about it, obviously, Wikipedia, first of all, because it wasn't around in 2000. But I was...
That's why they pay him the big bucks.
No, I just watched the wrestling that was on. I didn't go into the history at all. I watched pay-per-view to pay-per-view, just enjoying, and then I dropped off a little bit around 2005, 2006. 2007-ish, I can't remember when I stopped, university time. And then I came back and I went on a proper kind of historical kick,
So you
trying to
sort of
work out
discovered
everything.
it later.
Yeah, and discovered it late.
Well, let me ask
but
you this then. When you discovered it, so it was about 2007 when you really discovered it.
Yeah,
and
about
wrestling
then.
was very different 10 years on. How did you feel when you learned about it? The sort of silliness of this big issue over who wants to lose to who in which country.
and what felt...
How did it feel to learn that, you know?
And what side did you... Because everybody has a side that they initially go,
Yeah.
well, I'm on that side of it. Where did you lie, just going off the back of that?
Well, first of all, when I first found out about the screw job, it took me a very long time for anyone to really convince me that it was not a work.
Right.
Because it had all turned out so well
Yeah,
for WWE.
couldn't have booked it better.
No. At least I certainly couldn't.
That's why it's not a work, though.
I just wanted to see.
Yeah, I know,
I just wanted to
I
see
know.
that. That's why I'm here. Just to see the pained
pop
look
in.
on Kenny's face.
That's why, though, don't you think that's not a work? Because when have they ever booked anything that well?
Yeah,
Never.
a totally organic story. Mr. McMahon rising out of the ashes. And the thing is, I didn't read up on it because for me, McMahon had always been evil. Ever since I had been part of it, the McMahon name meant almost cartoon levels of villainy. So when I went back and saw this very kind of almost subdued, because he'd fought God by this point. So going back and seeing this act of villainy felt like, oh, this is.
It's
didn't
Mr. McMahon.
Yeah,
right?
and you
It's
didn't
nothing.
realize how seismic it was, how much it outraged people, how and then reading back and realizing that Vince thought he was going to be the baby face in that situation. 10 years on, the whole thing seemed to me the perfect way to set up not only McMahon versus Austin, but just McMahon as this kind of tentpole holding up the company. Right. It blew my mind that it was a real thing.
Well, some people still think it is a work because of the reasons you've mentioned. I think there's probably a lot of fans now who are, I think you're maybe representative of a lot more people than we are, I would say, who'd be watching this, who have heard of the Montreal Screwjob but don't know what it is or really know what it is, or understand why it was such a big deal.
When you finally figured out it wasn't working, you were reading all about it. Who were you on? Whose side were you on?
Oh yes. Well, when I first read about it, I was on Brett's, just because it just seemed like a horrible thing to do business, as they put it, for him. I can't remember.
Do you not think
he
should have done business?
Looking back at it now that we're doing WCPW, and after reading the book and after getting a lot more of the facts, because obviously the facts that are presented nowadays is very much the situation that favors. Very much the facts that favour WWE.
By them, yeah.
By them, yeah. Obviously not in Brett's book. But
or Hitman Heart Wrestling with Shadows.
Or in this book.
Or in titanscrewed.
The whole point of this was to give every viewpoint, Vince's, Sean's, Brett's, and Bischoff's to a point as well, and make them fair and let the reader decide. And
I feel like, as it comes across in the book, the sole reason that Brett didn't want to put over Sean is that one comment.
Yeah.
That Sean said, "I would never do it for you."
Yeah.
That is based on pride, and I honestly don't think it is. It is
It's
respect. Sure, but when that when that is the foundation for your argument of refusing to leave a company and put over the next champion.
But I do think there's more. I mean, that you're right. That comment is the straw that broke the camel's back. But I think there's a lot more to it. I mean, there's the initial plan when Bret Hart dropped the title to Shawn Michaels in 1996, which you can read about in Titan Shattered, which is the 96 one. Sinking is the 95 one, available at all good bookstores at WhatCulture.com. But, Bret puts Shawn over, he leaves, and the plan is all along for Shawn to return the favour the next year at WrestleMania 13. And he doesn't do it. Now, he did have an injury, but...
Well...
If you go back and watch WrestleMania 13, he certainly does not look injured when he's coming out to commentate for that main event.
No.
And I feel like, from reading this book and if you have read things like the Wrestling Observer in the past or you watch documentaries, Shawn Michaels, for a good at least 12 months, was doing little things all the time that was getting Bret.
Niggling at him.
But then, as it covers in the book, Bret was doing things that were then retorting at Shawn. The thing where Shawn's
they were as bad as each other.
Shawn's supposed to get a super kick in before the show goes off the air.
Oh yeah, and Bret forgot his lines.
Which judging from Bret Hart and the way he comes across, he probably didn't do it intentionally.
I don't think he did. No.
Shawn Michaels.
You can see how Shawn thought he did, though, when tensions are so high in there, because they've got each other's spot.
Yeah.
They both want to be the prettiest girl at Vince's dance, and they want to dance with Vince. And Vince is sort of going back and forth between the two. And it's like, well...
Stand back!
What a picture you're painting.
Well, just try and picture it, them in a pretty gown. And, they're both vying for his attention. And Vince loves that. Vince thrives on competition and people, competing with each other to try and get his affection. And so he loves it because it's great TV for him, them fighting. But what he doesn't realise, and later did realise, was that it's causing a significant rift in the locker room, and to the point where one of them had to go.
Well, Michaels walked out of the company briefly, didn't he? He had to be dragged back when Bret took a clump of his hair as a winning souvenir.
But that was all because of the Sunny Days thing, which all came about because of the Bret super kick going off the air with him still ranting at him thing, which all came about because of something else Sean had done, and blah 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 blah. What's layer and layer and layer.
What's interesting about not the only thing that's interesting about the book, but by 97 Vince had decided, right, I need to do something to beat WCW in the ratings, So there's things like Shotgun Saturday Night, which is covered in January, ECW Invasions, all these other things they do. But as someone who watched WWF in 1997, that is probably my favourite year of the company ever. From the January until the November, I don't think they've had a better year in terms of the stuff they did to change things. They went from having the big red RAW and cheesiness to having Raw is War and a big Titantron and then there was the Hart Foundation, the Nation of Domination.
Everything was edgy.
Everything was happening, but
there was no defined faces, heels, etc.
But the thing about the Montreal Screwjob that nobody talked, well, in this book it's talked about, but nobody really talks about it, is that when that happened, I remember watching WWF the month after the Screwjob, and I almost stopped watching I almost just went to WCW and watched that because the screw job, when you were a fan at that point, especially a fan of Bret Hart, it soured you very much on WWF. And their product was pretty bad in that month after. You know,
they struggled to find an identity.
And it didn't seem like they knew where they were going. You know, the rise of Steve Austin wasn't quite, it was on the way. But I don't think people immediately thought, well, he's definitely main event in WrestleMania and winning the title.
That's the thing. Like, he's reading in the book, Bret wanted to put over Steve Austin. Anyone but Shawn, really.
Anyone but Shawn, yeah.
But obviously, they knew that it had to be perfect for Austin. It had to be WrestleMania. So,
and they were right about that.
Oh yeah.
Because I mean, they knew they had Tyson imminent at that point.
And that's the thing, like when you read the book, it's just like the way the situation ramps up, the way it seems almost kind of inevitable that these guys that something bad has to happen. When you talk about literally every opportunity has been considered, whether it be DQ, vacating it. You've got the problem with Bischoff set to announce.
He was the problem. He didn't, not intentionally either, but he'd gone on Nitro the week before Survivor Series and said, next week, I've got a big announcement. He didn't say what it was, and I don't think it could have been Bret at that point. Or it could have been, but he got an arrangement with Bret that he wouldn't announce it.
Yeah.
And what his announcement was going to be was like the return of Kevin Nash or something from injury. But he knew by doing that, it made Vince panic because he liked to mess with Vince. And Vince was convinced that the big announcement would go at the start of Nitro. It'd be, we've signed the WWF champion. So he was like, Survivor Series, that is the last day. It needs to be off him before then.
Yeah.
And Bret wouldn't lose it any earlier because he's like, we've built up this match.
The worry that announcement and public perception can kill the belt, and that he would have like this really, really cold top prize at the top of his company, and just how paranoid everyone was. Bret in the locker room on the day, Hebner swearing down.
Bret obviously knew that there was something amiss, and like, because why else would you go to Earl Hebner and say, look, just have my back?
And he trusted Earl.
And he trusted Earl.
He trusted
you can't blame Earl.
No, well, you can't, but you can understand why Bret was so... Because the thing is, it's so easy for us to stand here and go, well, you can't blame Earl. But to him...
I can understand why Bret blamed Earl
Bret.
at the time. He doesn't now.
But the thing that's weird is that, you know, and I sort of... I mean, I still am kind of on Bret's side. In
me
a
too,
lot of ways.
me too. No,
but I do
I
understand Vince's side of it as well. But the thing that I find interesting is that, you know, Bret went off and got like $3 million a year in WCW. It's difficult to feel sympathy for that. You know,
he was not hurt physically. He was hurt emotionally.
Yeah.
You know, and
but
I think to this day he still is.
He could have went to WCW, and the problem was there was politics in WCW. There was Hogan, there was different people. But I think Bischoff said something once, and I do think there's a shred of truth in it. And he said, you know, what could I have done with Bret Hart? He was broken. He was depressed. And when you go back and watch those Nitros, late 97, early 98, he never seemed up for being there or happy.
He was there for money.
And that's fine, but then it's difficult to... And like you say at the beginning, like, who would have known that Vince McMahon would end up becoming, you know, because this huge star? Because I remember there was a Raw in December of 97, Vince had done the, you know, Bret Screwed Bret thing, and they did a thing when Raw went off the air, and they showed it on like Livewire or something, where Vince was going to he was going to get Steve Austin to relinquish the Intercontinental Championship, and he was going to give it to Rocky Maivia. And he gives Rock the belt, and then when it goes off the air, Vince goes to leave, and he's standing on the apron, and Austin just does a off the ropes to knock Vince on the ground. And Vince grabs a chair. And this is like babyface Vince McMahon announcer grabbing a steel chair, and you're like, what is going on? And for me, that was the moment where I went, okay, I'm back now. Like, because then it was like, the month after it was like they were still trying to paint Vince as a babyface. And for him trying to explain it all, but nobody was really buying him as a babyface.
He did that full interview, did he?
Yeah, Bret Screwed Bret, yeah.
But it's funny because that's what they initially tried to do. They were hoping that maybe, you know, because they would like to tell you that, well, out of that we make a positive opportunity and I'll go heel.
Oh yeah,
but
that's what they'll tell you.
That's what he did.
We created Mr. McMahon that night.
That's the thing. The legacy is so strong that you miss out on kind of just what a gigantic risk they took with that. And yeah, like you said, like I mean, they lost you. They could have lost everybody.
They did lose a lot of people for a couple of months there. It was Tyson was at the right time, just again covered in there. We go a little bit beyond 97 into WrestleMania 14, but because that's, you know, the peak for us. Like, well, not the peak, but the start of the peak from his perspective. And Tyson really brought people back in, the Tyson and Austin confrontation, that people go, oh, what's that's happening over there? You know, it was just the right time, because if they'd have waited too long, I think they would have lost everybody. You know, so they saved themselves just exactly when they should have.
And obviously there is like a lot more to talk about. We don't really have as much time to go into today as we would like to. Maybe what we will do, I think, is maybe late October, early November. It's 20 years since. Maybe we come back and we go deep into the Montreal Screwjob at that point.
Next September.
Next September. Oh yeah, this is 2016. Well, Brett returned 20 years ago this year.
Like WrestleMania main event being announced a year in advance.
Yes.
We'll see you.
Join us in November of
months.
2017. But yeah, Adam, final kind of thoughts on 1987 WWF. Have you watched a lot of it, and have you enjoyed the stuff that you've watched?
I've watched bits. After reading the book, I've gone back and I've watched bits and pieces. Like I've watched the debate between Paul Heyman and Jerry the King Lawler, where I can't believe some of the things that Heyman said.
Neither could Jerry. Neither could Jerry.
That is unbelievable that they weren't completely decimated with lawsuits. I've gone back and I've watched the promos, Sunny Days, the standing over the wheelchair. I've gone back and I've rewatched the match itself, which I'd never actually seen the match.
Even when you've seen it, you still haven't really seen it because
it's like
always thinking what about.
Well, it's like the Sixth Sense. Like once you know the ending, can you go back and watch the movie because you know what's coming. It's an absolutely fascinating year because, like you say, Attitude Year was just around the corner. They'd left behind the cartoon Postman gimmicks, and it was that transitional period with ECW. Because that's the thing, is that why it's such a good year to document in a book chronologically is because all the things added together, ECW, Brett and Shawn, and Steve Austin, they all sort of dovetail into one thing, which is the WWF changing, and like you have like certain characters, and they run throughout the entire book. And like you were saying before, Brett and Shawn seem like the two main protagonists, and then just at the last minute, up comes Mr. McMahon and Steve Austin, overtaking them in a kind of this huge explosion, which is the Montreal Screwjob.
I mean, if the Montreal Screwjob was a collapsed building, you know, and it was the rubble of that. In the aftermath, you've just got Steve Austin standing on top of the pile, just waiting to take over. Yeah,
and he was so big, it seems inevitable, but reading the book makes you realize of just how much they were scrabbling to carve something good out of just a locker room that was falling apart.
Yeah.
So essentially, buy the book, Titanscrewed. It will tell you all about 1987.
Buy the two prequels as well, and you'll get an even bigger picture.
If you've got the network, stuff to check out: Canadian Stampede, the main event of SummerSlam '97.
Every pay-per-view from '97.
And the thing is, the funny thing
Stampede's
is, with
amazing.
all this stuff that you read in here about all the people and all the egos and all the stuff, a lot of it was because everybody wanted the WWF Championship. And that's funny because today, if half of the roster would do half of the stuff to want to win the WWE title, we might be more enthralled in certain programs. But James Dixon, thank you for coming on to talk about your book that you will get royalties from. Thank you, Adam, for coming on to talk about
royalties for your shirt. Yeah.
I get no royalties whatsoever from any shirt. Adam, we won't ask you about your royalties in your kingdom. Where can we find you on Twitter?
Adam the Blumpier.
Don't look for me on Twitter.
KennyMC1985. Thanks for watching, everyone. Buy it at WhatCulture.com, shop.whatculture.com, and we'll see you soon.
Titanscrewed is the final book in the Titan trilogy, acclaimed for providing fans with rare backstage and insider stories from mid-90s WWE, a time of turbulence, wrestlers infighting, and ultimately betrayal. Written by James Dixon and Justin Henry, Titanscrewed covers 1997, featuring in-depth stories about Steve Austin nearly paralyzing himself at SummerSlam, WWF forming a brief partnership with ECW, and of course, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and the Montreal Screwjob, which has never received better coverage than in this book. As with all merch, Titanscrewed can be picked up at shop.whatculture.com.